My name is Dr. Stephan Esser, and I'm a fourth-generation plant-based vegan. Nearly 100 years ago, my great-grandfather learned about plant-based nutrition and how radically it could alter health. He practiced it himself and saw his diseases he struggled with melt away. As a result, he encouraged my grandfather, Dr. William L. Esser, to go off to naturopathy school and to learn more. My grandfather went to the New York College of Naturopathy, and from there he founded Esser's Ranch, a special place where for 65 years over 30,000 patients came to rediscover their health through plant-based nutrition, exercise, and therapeutic fasting. As a result of that example, I was inspired myself to go on to learn, to go off to medical school, where I went to Harvard and then to Mayo Clinic for my training. And as a result, I've integrated plant-based nutrition into my practice and into my life every day. In fact, my children are now being raised as fifth-generation plant-based vegans because of how powerful eating healthy food that we're intended for, that is science-based, can be to not only radically reduce our own personal risk of disease, but also to do the best things that's possible for animals and the best thing that is possible for planetary health. That's why I'm a fourth-generation plant-based vegan.
Do you recall the first time you learned about the word vegan and identified with it?
The first time I heard about the word vegan was in my youth. My grandfather gave lectures every Sunday for free to the community, and so I'd often hear that word actually spoken and spoken of. But as a kid growing up, I didn't identify myself as a vegan. I just said I eat healthy, right? Because that's how we were raised. And everybody in my family ate that way, and all my cousins and uncles and aunts all ate that way. So we knew there were people that ate healthfully and those who didn't eat healthfully, and our family chose to eat healthy food. But it all happened to be plant-based with no meat, no dairy, etc.
Take us back to when you first realized that other people are eating animals and you're not. What was that experience like?
There were probably two parts to it. One is a great sense of empathy or sadness for the animal. Having seen animals over the years die, it's a tragic thing to see and very painful. And to think that people do that when the animal doesn't have to die. You can eat so many other foods without requiring animal flesh. So a sense of sadness and also a sense of disgust to think of that dead animal being consumed.
Were you breastfed? Was your mother vegan during that time?
Absolutely. All of the children in my family were breastfed, and throughout that time my mother was plant-based as well.
What was school like growing up as a vegan?
Going to school was just like for most kids, both good days and bad days. Our parents prepared us well to be able to espouse plant-based nutrition, teaching us, first of all, why we did it, the real reasons for it, and then even at home playfully challenging us with questions or teases so we were accustomed to it, we're able to respond quickly. And they helped give us answers to be able to say to people in a humorous, playful, or sometimes even confrontational way if needed, to stand up for what we were doing that was right and good.
Were you ever bullied, ashamed, or embarrassed being vegan, and how did you deal with that?
Throughout my life, people try to make smart comments, even to this day, about, eating animals and real men eat beef, right? And comments of this kind. But the reality is, if you believe in something strong enough, you should be willing to and able to take any criticisms or any trash talking, if you will. So for us, I was #1 in the US in men's open doubles in 2002 in tennis, for example. And so lots of people say, oh my gosh, you're just plant-based, please, come on. And I'd go, bring it to the court and let's see what you got. Right? So we were able to trash talk right back because of the level of performance we were able to achieve. So my brother, likewise, in his tennis career and as athletically running 5Ks, 10Ks, marathons, etc., putting on great times, crushing it. Put your money where the mouth is, if you will, right? So eating plant-based allow us to achieve the best at many levels and while doing good. So it's the perfect blend.
What about your grades? I mean, did you get good grades in school and college and all that?
I was very blessed to do well in school. It required a lot of work, and I'll attribute that to my German mother who stayed on me with discipline. But yes, I ended up going to the University of South Florida for medical school. I went to Harvard for residency. I went to Mayo Clinic for sports fellowships. So I've been blessed academically, and I think that eating healthy food has allowed me to have a clear mind and have quick thoughts and recover quickly, and even the long hours on call, being on call for 30 hours at a time, eating plant-based, I attribute to quick recoveries. I never drank caffeine or anything of that kind. So yeah, I mean, plant-based I think has been a good foundation for me both physically and neurologically or academically.
Do you think being raised vegan has helped protect you from chronic diseases or benefited your health?
Without a doubt. The data right now is so incontrovertible for a plant-based diet being the optimum diet for humans. All the common diseases never even occurred for us or with us. Even growing up as kids, we never had any of the common childhood illnesses. Again, all just related to our excellent nutrition and my grandfather's supervision.
Sometimes I hear people say, well, if vegans are so healthy, what did they die from eventually?
In a lot of the plant-based movement, people make a mistake. They start thinking that eating plant-based nutrition is going to make you immortal or never have any diseases. Of course, that's not accurate, and that's not true. What we know is that eating a plant-based nutritional approach reduces the risk of all the most common diseases: high blood pressure, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, most hormonal cancers like colon, prostate, and the rest. But there are a lot of toxins we're exposed to in the world, whether it be from exhaust from vehicles, whether it be paints, whether it be the different beauty products we apply to ourselves, or heavy metals from the environment or our water. So life is not perfect. We all will die, and we'll die at some point of something. But in my family, certainly in the last 4 generations, no one's died of heart disease or type 2 diabetes or any of the common causes. Now remember, the #1 cause of death in America is heart disease, both for men and for women. So that should be the #1 thing we focus on not getting. And again, plant-based nutrition has been clearly proven to radically reduce that risk. But other things like certain cancers, weird things that can happen, those still can occur. So we want to be conscientious of that and do our best to be as healthy as possible, but not think that we're entering into a cult that promises immortality.
I had a recent interview with Wanda Huberman, and she mentioned dealing with osteoporosis and some lifestyle behaviors earlier in life that may have attributed to that, like lack of exercise, and an appropriate diet. And now she's struggling with that despite having been vegan for quite some time. What are your thoughts on that?
So osteoporosis is a thinning of the bone. The first thing that's important to remember is that it's very normal for a woman over the age of 35 to begin to lose some of the bone mineral density. That's just what occurs for all of us. Remember, we're not meant to be here forever. So there's 2 different parts to osteoporosis. One is, dangerous osteoporosis, where you're getting compression fractures or fractures in your femur or leg, just with small little nothing activities. The other part of osteoporosis is, it's just a number, which to some extent it is. So looking at a DEXA scan, for example, which is a bone density scan, can tell you, you've lost some bone density. Well, the question becomes, is that just a number, or is that a risk, and is that a dangerous thing? What level are you at? That's the very first thing I think that's important, is to test and not guess, if you will. But the second thing to remember, as I mentioned, is it's normal for a certain level of bone density to decline over time. However, that bone density can be preserved by multiple factors, including excellent nutrition with adequate intakes of vitamin K, adequate intake of calcium, and of course, plenty of the neurohormone vitamin D. In addition, excellent exercise, weight-bearing activities that many of us, we've gone on the couch, as the term goes, and we're not doing the weight-bearing activities that build and strengthen the bone long-term. Studies show, for example, if you're doing weight-bearing exercises, you can slow osteoporosis by 1% per year. Well, guess what? Most women lose 1% of bone density per year. So as a result, you could neutralize that effect pretty significantly. The next one, of course, are different toxins we're exposed to. Let's use the example of high amounts of sodium, which in large quantities can be a toxin. A high sodium diet actually makes you lose calcium from your bones. That's because sodium is a cation, Na+, and calcium is a cation, Ca+. The body wants to balance out cations and anions, so if you eat large quantities of salt, you're more likely to pee out your calcium. In addition, things like large quantities of caffeine. Being a diuretic, it makes you pee more, and it actually can cause you to pee more of your calcium off. So these different factors, among others, can play a role and a part in losing bone density. So I tell people the first thing is know your risk, know your personal and family history, and then make intentional changes. So excellent nutrition can help decrease the acidity that washes out bones as well and help preserve that calcium longer. But certainly the pillars of good bone health are nutrition and exercise together. And then the third little stool leg, if you will, is looking at the toxic exposures.
Quick question about vitamin D. If you supplement it, is there a better time of day to take it? Is it better to take it with a meal so you can get the calcium and the K and all that together at the same time? Does any of that matter?
So the body's pretty brilliant. You don't need to necessarily combine all three of those at the same time. As far as taking vitamin D, everybody responds slightly different, and some people it is very activating. And so if it's activating to you, I'd take it during the day. If it's non-activating, then you're fine to take it whenever is comfortable to you and reasonable. But I do like most supplements, if they're going to be taken an hour or two prior to sleep, so they're not just sitting in the stomach, but rather get moved forward through and into the intestines. Now, things like melatonin or valerian, you may need to take right before sleep. So remember, when you take something that goes in, sits in your stomach, and then it has to get out into the intestinal tract. It gets out and moves forward as a response to the amount of contractions of the stomach, how concentrated the environment is in there, whether it's very concentrated or low concentration, things like that influence. And then whether you eat something else afterwards. Because if you eat something else afterwards, it's going to move things forward, right? Just like a train or a car moves other things forward along it.
As far as the bone density, there was a couple of years ago a lot of talk and controversy over some research that showed vegans had less bone density than other people. And I think Barnard and some others responded to that, maybe because we tend to be lower BMI.
I am aware of that research, and there are a number of reasons that arguably would be related to that. BMI is certainly one of those factors, and it also depends on who the group is that you're looking at, right? As far as their overall health, overall function, overall activity. Is this a group of people that just eats well but doesn't exercise, right? So we're losing out on some of the benefits there. Or are these people that were very chronically ill and unwell and then chose to go vegan to reverse some of their diseases, so they already had built up disease? So the studies have some limitations in them, but that's why for me I encourage people to always take their health personally and kind of know where you are with kind of your bone density, your overall health, etc.
I recently met with Ben Costanzo of Plant-Based Mafia in West Palm Beach, Florida, and it was an awesome interview that's on my YouTube channel. He mentioned having some back pain and seeing a specialist, and they suggested getting a rod, and he did his own little research and decided he was going to switch from eating a high inflammatory meat, egg, and dairy diet to a plant-based diet, and he went totally raw for a few months and the pain went away. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Absolutely. The body craves anti-inflammatory nutrition, fiber, water, etc. It doesn't want the high inflammatory foods that are really the heart of the standard American diet. So studies show the following. If you eat the standard American diet, you begin to influence inflammation in a very negative way. Number one, you alter blood flow. So crucial to know this. A single high-fat meal inhibits blood flow by up to 50% for 4 hours. This is crazy. So the tiny little blood vessels that feed the spine, they essentially begin to be closed down. They're no longer, the highways aren't open. You can't get the blood flow in with the oxygen and the micronutrients and the etc. And all this inflammation builds up in that area. Kind of like if the garbage trucks aren't taking your garbage from your neighborhood, it starts smelling and being ugly and not clean. And so when those blood vessels are blocked off by a high meat, high fat, high cholesterol, high salt and sugar diet, we don't get good blood flow. And as a result, inflammation increases. Number two, arachidonic acid is a primary source of inflammation in our bodies because arachidonic acid breaks down to form what are called prostaglandins, which are basic little molecules of inflammation. Now, studies show that the leading sources of arachidonic acid in the American diet are meat, dairy, refined grains, and oils. And so when you take those out of your diet, you're reducing the amount of prostaglandins or inflammatory molecules produced. Now this is crucial to remember because we all know about ibuprofen, Motrin, Aleve. Those medications called non-NSAIDs, right, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, they block the conversion of arachidonic acid to prostaglandins. That's how they work. Well, instead of taking a drug, why not just take the arachidonic acid out of your diet or reduce it radically? As a result, you have less of that parent molecule to turn into prostaglandins. You know, there's so many ways in which this powerfully affects the spine, but that's not just the only place. Studies show, for example, you have higher rates of rotator cuff tears and Achilles tendon tears and other tendon problems if you're consuming a high-fat, high-cholesterol diet. So when you consume that plant-based nutritional program, you increase blood flow, you reduce inflammation, and in my experience with people who follow my protocol of like 4 to 6 weeks, their pain in their joints, their knees, their hips, their back, etc., drops by anywhere from 70 to 90% in just 4 weeks. That's how powerful this is.
You're a tall guy. I'm a short guy. And they say, I mean, you may have heard of this, There was a study that vegans tend to be shorter than non-vegans. Have you heard about that study?
So that's make-believe, it's myth. Probably the most powerful predictor of height in large part is going to be genetic inheritance. And then if we're fed adequate calories, being vegan is not, I'm 6'5", that's correct. My brother's 6'4", my great-grandfather was 6'4", right, you know, et cetera. So it's foolishness and cockamamie. You know, height is largely genetically predetermined, but influenced heavily by nutrition, exercise, and behaviors. So yes, eating a plant-based program does not inhibit growth.
And there's a lot of talk about growth and muscle building and needing to eat animals to promote that. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a beautiful lie told by organizations that want to sell you more meat and dairy. That's all it is. There's no good data to support that. The heart of muscle building and bone building is going to be, number one, adequate caloric intake for the needs. So looking at what a person's basic metabolic rate are, then making sure they're getting that amount or plus more based upon their level of exercise and activity. And then adding to that the amounts of micronutrients, et cetera, that are required. But on a strictly plant-based 1000% vegan diet, you can get more than adequate calories, micronutrients, and proteins, fats, and carbohydrates to build a beautiful, strong, powerful body. So for those of you out there, obviously we know the strongest, the biggest, and the fastest, right? Most of these animals are all plant-based, right? So as we look at gorillas and hippos and, you know, elephants and all the rest, these are all plant-based eaters. And we are intended for a very similar diet to other primates, which is largely plant-derived.
A lot more people are raising their children vegan. But there's these occasional isolated media hyped up events where somebody's accused of neglect or abuse. Their kid either died. What's your thoughts on that?
Right, I'd say number one, it's a tragic situation anytime, number one, a child is mistreated or inappropriately treated, whether they're vegan or otherwise, right? I mean, all these cases of kids chained in places and horrible things going on. But that certainly is not at a higher rate in plant-based eaters. It's probably at a lower rate as compared to others. Certainly the media likes to hype stories of individuals doing inappropriate things to their children. I would argue the majority of those scenarios have nothing to do with plant-based nutrition, but everything to do with poor parenting or perhaps misinformed individuals or parents who are neglecting their duties as a parent. And that's the unfortunate reality. So for example, you hear about a baby every once in a while whose parents raised on apple juice, right? And then the child gets dehydrated and bad things happen. That has nothing to do with plant-based nutrition. That has to do with a parent who is poorly educated and made unwise decisions about the health care of their child. The reality is raising your children plant-based is the best thing that can be done for them because it radically reduces their risk of all the common childhood and then future adult diseases and allows them to grow and develop appropriately. But the key I would use in here is appropriate preparation and appropriate planning. Feeding a child iceberg lettuce with some carrots and that's their primary diet is inadequate and is inappropriate. It needs to be a comprehensive, well thought out program is what should be provided to the child. The standard American diet is absolutely toxic, and so all the parents who feed their children the standard American diet are abusing their child, right? We know that pediatric obesity has tripled in the last 10 to 15 years. We know that children are having diseases that never existed in children before, like type 2 diabetes that is onset, like heart disease in children. This is due to the misinformed decision making of the parent as they've been misinformed by society at large. The same thing can occur to the parent who might be well-intentioned and does not do the research. So any parent who's going to raise their children plant-based needs to do so intelligently, just like they should with every other aspect of parenting, where they want their kid to be healthy and vital and better and healthier than they were. That's the key. But this whole focus on one or two instances and trying to say that this is the majority is outrageous, offensive to the mind, and not rational in any way.
So when a child is going from weaning to whole foods, what are some foods that they might want to consider transitioning their child into?
The plant-based world is just awash with amazing things to eat. So a great place, a simple place to start, I love our sweet potatoes, our bananas, our pears, right? All these delicious things, our apples. These are low allergenic foods, right? So very few children find allergies to these and are very tasty and sweet and yummy. Combining that with a little bit of whole rice that's blended up after you've cooked it, right? Or whole oats that are blended up after you've cooked it, and put them in a little pouch, right? Or spoon feed them into the child is a wonderful way to go. So starting with purees and then with mashes, and then from there to smoothies, and then the whole foods, being able to hold it in their hand, right? The little cubes of sweet potatoes that are well baked. Oh, so wonderful. And the child loves them and begins to find an attachment and affiliation for it. And then beginning to add the greens slowly in there, right, as well, because they're less sweet. Remember, a mother's breast milk is intensely sweet. And so going from that to greens, the child will likely rebel, right? Not getting the same amount of dopamine. So instead you go to the sweet fruits there, and then you add little bits of greens little by little into that blended, that puree, etc. Just they don't even taste it, and then add more and more, and now they get aware of it. And before you know it, they crave it. So I still remember well my little daughter with little pieces of steamed kale sitting on the ground with me eating steamed kale that was warm while eating, slices of fresh oranges together. What a great combination. To this day, right, she enjoys those greens and has special memories with them. And that's the heart we want to do. If you have children or grandchildren or nephews or nieces, is begin the love affair with healthy food. Do not leave them thinking, ew, that's not what I want the blank. No, no, no. But rather, teach them the romance of it. Look at the colors and the flavors and the textures and be playful with it. That's at the heart of success for long term for all of us, because many of us make the mistake of obsessing about, oh, I missed this, or I wish I had that, or oh, that smell, or I remember this. No, it's time to romance what we have and what we want that gives us the vitality and the health that we crave for. And that is why I don't crave the junk food and the other garbage, because I've created such a love affair with those dates, those medjool dates, oh my goodness, right? Or the double-baked sweet potato dripping with the sugars coming out, right? Or the tartness of that fresh cherry tomato, or the crispness of that cucumber. All of those are magical. But not only they taste good and look good and are colorful, etc., but they're actually good for you. Kind of like a healthy relationship with someone you love and care about. And that's why it's so crucial to step away from the false foods, the fake chemical cuisine, right? All of that stuff. That's not what you're intended for.
What kind of foods do you eat as an adult now?
What do I eat as an adult? I eat a lot because I love food. And what I eat, I try to vary throughout the days and the weeks because I love creativity and I love variety. So I eat what's in season, I eat what I can get my hands on that's healthy, and I do my best to channel factor my life so that my home, my work, anywhere I am is got access to good healthy foods. An average day for me looks like either an oatmeal or quinoa breakfast, maybe a small handful of nuts or seeds with a bunch of fruits, often with a fresh greens and berries smoothie. Some mornings I make fresh oatmeal pancakes. Other mornings I just have a handful of walnuts with fresh strawberries, a little bit of cashew butter and a smoothie. Other days varies from there. Other times I have a big salad for breakfast. Sometimes I just have nothing but fruit if it's in season. When I get my hands on some cases of mangoes, have 6 mangoes for breakfast, right? And that's it. Snacks are usually all kinds of fruits or nuts or dried fruits, etc. Sometimes combined together. The next meal might be a big salad and the leftovers from the night before. And then the next meal, big salads, fresh squeezed vegetable juices, and any variety of whether it be a bean dish, a rice dish with grains, a potato-based dish, a pasta dish. I mean, that's the beauty of plant-based nutrition. The variety never stops. A lot of people think, oh, when I get away from the meat and the dairy, it's going to be so limited. And yet the reality is, it's actually sometimes overwhelming how much variety you can have, that it's just nonstop. The list goes on and on. It's almost endless. It's great. My grandfather wrote a book a long time ago. It's called The Dictionary of Natural Foods. And in this, you page through it and page after page of all kinds of different fruits and vegetables and things that you may never have tried. And that's the key, is beginning to celebrate, right, your health and your life with, hey, what's in season? What's available? What's fresh? What can I get today? And getting back in touch with where that food comes from, growing some of it yourself. Here at our ranch, we're moving in the direction of some of the organic gardening, and we've got little gardens at my home as well, growing our own herbs and tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers. And so that's what I want to encourage all of you to do as well that are watching, is get back in touch where that food comes from. Have fun with it, celebrate with it, and have that crazy, off-the-chain, colorful, playful, creative dynamic lifestyle. It's so much fun.
What about any tips for children transitioning, or parents who are trying to transition their children into eating whole plant foods, especially since they might have smaller stomachs and it might be harder for them to get enough calories, for example?
Yeah, I think the first thing, number one, is for the parents to do it themselves first. Make sure that they're doing it, they're consistent with it, and they're comfortable with it. Number two is to make it playful for the child. Make it a celebration, not a, Johnny, you can't have your cheese sticks tonight, right? No, that's not it. Or no, we're no longer going to Chick-fil-A. But rather a fun and playful experience with food. Number three is to gear the food in the direction, like you mentioned, the child's growing, the child plays on 3 soccer teams, etc. Let's say, we may have to go with more calorie-dense foods, right? So they may get more of the nuts, the dried fruits, right? More of the complex carbohydrates. It's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. They just need more of those. That's different than the, let's say, 62-year-old postmenopausal female who's struggling with being overweight. Well, those nuts, those seeds, and those dried fruits may compromise and keep her from achieving the weight loss that she wants to achieve. So for the kids, be consistent, make it playful and be charismatic with it. And then as you're doing it for the kids, make sure they understand why we're doing it, right? What's it all about? Well, we're doing it for our health, but we're also doing it for the animals, right? We're doing it for the planet. It's amazing when you get your kids involved with something where they feel like they're being part of an answer to a problem, right? Like what they do matters. It's pretty cool. They begin to change their whole way of perceiving it. Instead of it just being about them, it's about something even bigger and better and greater than just their personal choices in that moment. But those simple factoids, that can be very powerful.
When I look at nutrients, like look at the chronometer and what kind of nutrient intake I'm getting. Vitamin E is a little tricky, but I kind of figured that out. Selenium were a little tricky, and calcium was another one that was a little tricky. And I hear, we don't necessarily need 1,000 milligrams. We could do with 600, 500 or something like that. So what are your thoughts on calcium, iodine, maybe, and selenium?
Yeah, so people talk about specific nutrients that might be either lacking or low in a fully vegan diet that are worthwhile to kind of monitor or watch. And perhaps the most prominent in those would be things like vitamin D, iodine. Some people talk about magnesium and zinc as well, and even selenium. I think those can be adequately obtained, again, with a more of a dynamic, comprehensive, well thought out approach, right? So kind of you think about things like selenium. I mean, we even get selenium in cucumbers, right? But certainly things like 2 or 3 Brazil nuts a day get you adequate selenium, right? And so you've got plenty there. Iodine, I was never raised having any sort of sea vegetables, and yet none of us ever had any iodine problems. So it always makes me wonder, I wonder where we were getting that iodine that was adequate for us as kids. What I will tell you is that I think consuming a little bit of sea vegetables 2 or 3 times a week is probably adequate to create a good, healthy thyroid function and give it adequate amounts of iodine, since obviously it's so crucial for thyroid hormone formation. Things like magnesium and potassium, obviously you can get in all the different rich fruits, in particular, and some of the vegetables as well. Things like zinc, we may have to be a little bit more selective kind of with the food choices you make. And calcium, again, leafy green vegetables have large quantities of calcium when eaten in abundance. When eaten in small amounts, we may not be getting adequate quantities. Vitamin D, likewise, is important to get some sun exposure, right? 30 minutes or 15 to 30 minutes, arms, legs, upper back, etc., to get adequate production. Remember, it's a neurohormone, to get production of vitamin D. But again, testing those levels, I think, is a worthwhile thing to intermittently do, to see if perhaps you are getting adequate amounts, or if that needs to be at some point supplemented in the genetically primed individual who does not absorb enough from their food.
People say don't take the reductionist approach, like T. Colin Campbell maybe, and then you got people on the other extreme like Fuhrman, who's like, you really got to be a nutritarian, hyper focused on these, and maybe even supplement. Do you think people really need to worry about this as much, or just eat a whole variety of beans, greens, grains, fruits, veggies, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices?
Yeah, I tell people that talking about supplementation is probably like plant-based 3.0. And you shouldn't even touch that area until you've been plant-based 1.0 and 2.0 for multiple years. That's the reality for the majority of us, because unfortunately many people throw up this smokescreen and go, I'm worried about my amount of omega-3s, thus, da-da-da-da. And it's like, whoa, you're still eating Mickey D's. You're still at Chick-fil-A. Why are you worried about your omega-3s? You ain't got to worry about that until you're deep in it, right? And now you can start talking about, like, am I getting enough omega-3s? Same thing with the zinc and all these other micronutrients. My experience with patients is, unfortunately, many of them use the question of, oh, well, what about this, as an excuse not to go 100% into a plant-based approach. So I think for those people who are 100%, right, and now they find, hey, this is a little lower, this is a little off, or now we can talk about that supplementation for that small percentage of people that require it. So I think the first place to start is a foundational program of excellent nutrition, excellent exercise, adequate sleep, avoidance of toxins, and good emotional poise. And if that, then there's little cracks, little crinks here and there, fine, let's fill them in.
I think a variety, though, of greens is important to emphasize when we talk about this stuff, because it's easy to eat a whole bunch of spinach and then get too many oxalates or too many raw cruciferous and get goitrogens or something. I mean, do people really need to worry about that? Or is there any way to kind of have a takeaway of how to approach the variety that's ideal?
Yeah, when you're first starting into a plant-based program, it's worthwhile following someone's approach, someone with time-tested, well-based evidence that's realistically doable for you at your present stage of life. And I think that can get you in good habits and a good path and a good pattern of healthy living. The other thing I'd say is to avoid extremes, right? This is not a cult, this is not a crazy place to go. So the person who begins to eat healthfully and then goes, I'm going to have nothing but, as you suggested, raw cruciferous vegetables 5 times a day at 2 pounds each time, like, what are you doing? That's not what we recommend at all. That's not what's encouraged here at all. This is supposed to be about a rational, well thought out, well balanced approach to healthy living. Right? So adequate quantities of the deep green vegetables, and having a variety of them brings different micronutrients to the table, right? So when you're having those dandelion greens, you're getting a certain micronutrient profile there. When you're getting the broccoli, you're getting a different profile there. And that's the beauty of it. This should be comprehensive, right? But it should be sort of variety kind of throughout your day and throughout your life. Plus, it's more fun that way. You know, a rare occasion you have that person who just wants to be 1,000%, they want to do a mono diet. And unfortunately, most mono diets are not sustainable and leave us with, you know, kind of micronutrient inadequacies.
Do you supplement?
I of course take vitamin B12, right? Because I think that is one that universally should be taken by all serious plant-based people who have been doing it for more than 2 or 3 years, right? Because we do require small quantities, micrograms of B12 every day. And after 6 to 20 years, you become B12 deficient and use up your stored resources if you're washing your vegetables, which I encourage you to do. Because remember, B12 is formed by the bacteria that are found on vegetation. But we've learned that we don't want to get Montezuma's revenge or some sort of random, you know, diarrheal disease, and so we wash our fruits and vegetables, thereby washing off the bacteria that form B12 that we'd otherwise get when they're in our gut. So yes, every serious plant-based person should be taking a B12 and check their B12 levels once a year, once every couple of years. As far as other things, I intermittently make use of other supplements, but none on a sustained, regular basis.
Are you comfortable talking about fatty acids? Because that's an extremely controversial topic right now amongst the, you know, the Fuhrman followers and the Clapper followers. Create this little nuanced divide. So what are your thoughts on fatty acids?
My thoughts are, again, I'd put this in kind of vegan 3.0 category, that the average person doesn't need to worry about or think about until they've been plant-based for a decade, you know, and then they can start thinking about it. As far as long-term studies, what we lack right now when it comes to the consumption of fatty acids is a really good, well-done, long-term follow-up study in humans in which you randomize groups to a certain fatty acid profile and another group to not eating that fatty acid profile. We lack that to really see if there's a significant outcome when it comes to cognitive function, neurologic decline, various cancer risks, etc. We need that data, because otherwise where we are is just kind of people arguing amongst themselves. That is lacking. As a Harvard and Mayo guy, I like science and data and not just personal opinions. And the problem is where we are with that right now at the fatty acids, et cetera, is kind of in the bench work, in the lab data, where we say, oh, well, in animals, when you do this, this happens, right? Or this study would suggest blank, but nothing that's really, really robust. What we do know that's incredibly robust is that when you transition your nutrition from a heavy standard American diet, meat, dairy, right, refined flour and sugar, to a plant-based program, the majority of all the diseases that are common melt away. What we want to know long term is, well, if you modify that just slightly with a different fatty acid profile, right, whether it be the nuts or the seeds or the deep green vegetables or the other things, well, does that modify it in the positive way? Or does it increase the risk of other problems? We don't have that data right now. So for me, whether you choose to add in some omega-3s from krill oil, or whether you choose to add in some omega-3s from somewhere else or another fatty acid, et cetera, to an already amazing program of food, go knock yourself out if you want to do that. But if you don't want to, you're also still in line with kind of where the data is. The data is not strongly supportive in the human studies with long-term randomization. They don't exist. And that's the sort of data we really need. That's very different than, let's say, randomization of people with regards to plant-based versus omnivorous diets and looking at blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, all that we clearly know. Those things just melt away when you go on a plant-based program.
As far as sea vegetables, I asked Barnard about that, and he wishes more people in this culture would eat sea vegetables, algae, or whatever. I feel like there's a lot of potential there for sustainable food sources that are rich in micronutrients and even fatty acids and maybe even B12.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. I think there's some active and inactive B12. What are your thoughts on that kind of stuff?
Well, I think sea vegetables are a very exciting area because, as you suggested, for sustainability for a continually growing population, it would be outstanding to be able to grow these sea vegetables and then use them for human consumption. For right now, they're a wonderful supplement to an excellent diet, and so adding some of them in several days per week in small quantities, I think, is excellent for overall health, and in particular, as we spoke of, with regards to iodine exposures for the thyroid, et cetera.
What is an important message you would like to get out there, aside of maybe things I'm talking about?
The message I'd like everybody to hear from this is that you are incredibly powerful, and the choices that you make on a daily basis with your fingers, feet, and forks are some of the most radical predictors of your health, not only today, but for years to come. And not only do your choices influence your personal health, but they radically influence the state of empathy, of health, of vitality for the animals, obviously, in our entire world, but also of the world at large, of planetary health. The personal decisions that you make with every finger and with every fork, every spoonful, etc., are radically predictive of your health today and of the health for our future as a populace. And so I just want to remind you of just the power that you have. It's tempting to think that what you do doesn't matter. But the reality is what you do is radically predictive for your health for decades to come. Right now, you're creating your health for 10 years from now, for 20 years from now. Every bite, every chew, every swallow is turning cells on or turning them off through a process of epigenetics. You are influencing your genetic expression. And it's so exciting to think that what you're doing is going to make you healthier, more vital, more able, more capable of living your best life.
Tell us about this place.
Right now we're in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, which is Jacksonville, Florida. We're on Esser's Ranch, which is a very special place, about 6 acres of land on the barrier island of Ponte Vedra Beach. Here we host people to come and stay, to get away from the world. You can see how kind of quiet the birds and the animals, etc., to get away from the world and to experience what it's like to recharge, to reset through some excellent nutrition, gentle exercise, and a guided course that we offer people to kind of just step away from their busy and at times chaotic life and to rediscover health.
And how can they find more about this?
You can learn more about what I do and what we offer at esserhealth.com, or you can join me on social media at Esser Health on Instagram, Facebook, and other social media channels.
And you have some future plans for this place. I don't want to date the video, but let's talk about the vision you have for this place.
We do. We're very excited. You know, I grew up at my grandfather's Esser's Ranch, and there it was really a land of miracles, a very special place for people to come and experience transformation. And what we're hopeful of is to create a similar lifestyle intervention center where people can come and stay for days, weeks, or months, and to allow them to recharge and reset. We hope to have large organic gardens in this setting, and perhaps even some community-supported agriculture. A big part of what we'll also do is continue to offer education and inspiration to the community with intermittent retreats, seminars, and free lectures. So a lot of exciting things going on to help empower and inspire people to live their best lives.
You said intermittent, and that made me think about fasting. What are your thoughts on fasting? I'm really into time-restricted intermittent fasting right now because I noticed like I was having some kind of discomfort at night when I was trying to sleep, and my wife was too, and I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning. As soon as we started doing a little bit of fasting, all those problems seemed to kind of go away. And it was mostly just not eating after a certain time and eating in a smaller frame of time. Do you think that's a healthy thing to do and encourage others to do?
Fasting is perhaps one of the most powerful physiologic interventions people can do. True fasting, of course, is complete physiologic rest. Rest of the gut, rest of the intestines, but also rest of our bodies and rest of our minds, which allows your body to use its energy toward healing and restoration. You want to remember that although food gives you energy, it also requires energy to break it down, digest and absorb and metabolize and put into your cells. So when you stop eating as much, which remember, I love the old Chinese proverb, it says that our doctor lives on 3/4 of what we eat, we live off the other quarter. So intermittent or true physiologic prolonged fasting are both very powerful modalities. So intermittent fasting, of course, as I mentioned, it gives our body that rest period, and during that rest period, autophagy upticks, right, where our body identifies cells that are not healthy, not robust, it breaks them down and it metabolizes them. Also, inflammation reduces, and of course, the parasympathetic nervous system, that part that's about rest and digestion, that increases activation. So instead of just this constant cortisol, hyper sympathetic outflow, this fight or flight nervous system that's going on, when you do some therapeutic fasting, your body goes into a state of parasympathetic tone that increases and healing begins. And so yes, intermittent fasting or true prolonged fasting under supervision can be outstanding.
Is there something people could do on their own that's safe and appropriate to implement?
Yeah, and so kind of intermittent fasting where an individual eats only certain hours during the day and the rest of the time does not, I think is a great place to start and is safe for the majority of people. Even something as simple as saying, well, I'm not going to eat after 8 p.m. and I'm not going to eat before 7 a.m. Right there, you just created a nice window, right, of an intermittent fast, if you will. And that's truly the heart of success long-term for most people because we're diurnal animals. We're meant to eat during the day. Most primates do not, grab a bunch of stuff and put stuff in a hole and then pull it out in the middle of the night. They don't do that. They are fasting throughout the night, and we should as well. So that's the first place to start. No more, hitting up the refrigerator at midnight and having ice cream. That's not a healthy thing for you. The next, though, would be true intermittent fasting. So adding additional hours in the morning or other times of day to restrict your eating time too. But just as important, if not more important, of fasting is, well, what are you eating when you eat? So I see people all the time make the mistake. I'm doing intermittent fasting, but then they scarf down the junk food, and it's just as unhealthy eating it in a small window as it was eating it throughout the day. So, eating your Chick-fil-A stretched out over 6 hours versus eating it in 3 hours makes no difference. So we've got to make sure what we are eating is excellent nutritional quality. And then I think intermittent fasting or true physiologic fasting for an extended period under supervision can even add to that health benefits.
Now, what do you think are some of the reasons why people quit veganism or fail at it?
I'd say there are multiple. Let's see if we can hit a few of them. One would be eating a plant-based program in our society has not yet reached that point numerically where you feel like you're part of just the norm, that you feel comfortable, that you're like, oh, everybody else is doing it, thus I feel comfortable doing it. When you begin a plant-based program, you are immediately placing yourself in a smaller, although growing, which is exciting, category of individuals. So you have to be comfortable with being different. And a lot of people aren't. They want to fit in with everyone else, right? They want to do just like everyone else. They don't want to create waves or ripples or conflict or confrontation, right? So they want to feel like they're part of what everybody else is doing. And they want to also not create confrontation or conflict. And then the next parts end up being as related often to habits. So our habits are very powerful, right? They kind of just drive us to do certain things because it's what I've always done. It's what my parents did, right? They don't want to feel like they're selling their parents or their family out. Another one would be that many of the more refined foods and foods of animal origin provide great amounts of dopamine. So they make you feel good in the moment. So many people are truly addicted to those foods. And that addiction to dopamine is a very powerful motivator. So when you begin to eat the fruits and the vegetables, they don't provide you as much dopamine as the refined foods and foods of animal origin normally do, the way they're prepared. And so as a result, you have to reset, if you will, that dopamine sensitivity. Now, once you've been on the program for 30 days, 60 days, 90, 180 days, you reset. And now these simple foods like that ripe mango or that amazing ripe Smyrna fig, right, releases huge quantities of dopamine, similar to what the more processed food previously did. And now it's simple and straightforward to do. But it's not always easy because, why? We like to fit in and we have habits and behaviors that have to be changed and altered. So a lot of different pieces of the puzzle there. Then we get into stuff like convenience, right? Where it might be more convenient to swing by the fast food place that's next door to you because there are not as many fast food locations that offer plant-based options. Although that's changing rapidly, isn't it? And so more and more plant-based options for you. So I think the first place is awareness of what it's doing to the environment, to animals, and your own personal health. That can be a strong motivator. The next one, though, is we have to change our own perceptions of what's easy, what's hard, what I'm comfortable with. Am I willing to be called a vegan or called a plant-based eater, etc. And then moving down that chain. So I encourage people to really sit down and think about what are my reasons not to change? And also, what are my reasons to change? Well, until your reasons to change far, far outweigh your reasons not, you're not ready. So you can't be like, well, I heard that it's good for the environment, good for animals, I'm just gonna go do it. But over here, you've got a laundry list of all the reasons you won't be successful, can't do it, so on and so forth. Like, I don't know what to prepare, I don't know how to prepare, I don't know where to buy it, I don't like cooking, I don't have this. I mean, the list goes on. But many people jump right in, and they're not ready. They're not ready, they're not there yet. So that's okay, be gentle with yourself, right? And if you need to, go slowly. Some people, they hear the message of plant-based nutrition, of veganism, they go, I'm in. I never knew animals were treated that way, or I never knew that I could reverse my diabetes. Like, I'm all in. And they go 100%, they never look back. That's great for them. But others, the rest of us, we've got to make little changes, move slowly down the pipe, and little by little expand and advance, kind of our nutrition to the optimal nutrition, which is plant-based nutrition. Yeah, it's always fun for me to go back, since I'm a fourth generation plant-based guy, my grandfather ran this health ranch, to just go back and look at some of his old flyers, kind of back in the day, House of Health Truth. Here it kind of his place when he had it in Johns Island, South Carolina, had this big, beautiful old place here. There he is, looking very dashing. And, kind of just talking about, have you ever had any conception of what perfect health means? Because it's so true. Like he said here in one of his flyers, so many of us have put ourselves on the shelf, right? And we've kind of lost sight of what it's like to feel healthy. Kind of cool to go back. These are some of the books he wrote, the Dictionary of Natural Foods. I love this. This is my mom working in the kitchen where she was making meals for everybody. And there's another picture of her there. So you can kind of see there she has that nice tray of all the fresh veggies and a nice vegetable juice for somebody at the ranch back in the day. And people lived in these cute little bungalows, right? And got their meals every day, etc. Very classic Florida there. But that's why I find myself on my grandfather's shoulders. That's me as a kid, and my grandfather in his late 70s, early 80s there. And that's how I grew up, and I think I'll live the rest of my life kind of on his shoulders. That he taught me so much about health and helping people.
That dictionary, you talked about that already, right?
Yeah, the Dictionary of Natural Foods. This is one of the books that he wrote that, the real goal of this, right, like it says, a book of vital information about foods for everyone. And it's so true. That was the heart of his message, right? That everybody could be healthy and they just needed to learn more. So this book, multiple versions of it, but you can see here all about a gooseberry, what it is, how alkaline it is, what different vitamins it has in it, etc. But all nicely put together here. There's an older version, and then we've got a newer version here that included photos and different lunch options and varieties, very simple approaches to foods. But beautiful to learn more about it, and as we all should, to learn about the food that we eat and what it has in it and where it comes from.
And what year are those books?
I think his original, let's pull it up and look, 1947, right? This is the original one. Here's a Milton quote. In what thou eatest and drinkest, seek from thence due nourishment, not gluttonous delight. So mayest thou live till like ripe fruit thou drop into thy mother's lap or be with ease, gathered, not harshly plucked, for death mature. Yeah? The poet, he knew it back then too. So yeah.
Now, this ties into the natural hygiene movement.
That's
I've heard
right.
a lot about that.
That's right. This is my dad, my father, this is my grandfather wrote this, right? And being featured in 1958 on the front of the Natural Hygiene magazine. My grandfather is one of the founders of this organization that was focused heavily on education, and it continues to be, which is very exciting. It's I think celebrating its 70+ year right now of sharing the message of plant-based nutrition, exercise, fasting, etc., to inspire and motivate people. And so here you can see how to have healthier children, articles back then, right? Talking about breakfast, lunches, how to keep your kid healthy. But so much good information, and the organization continues to have actually a beautiful, big, colorful magazine that goes out quarterly, all with information education for people.
And that's called the National Health Association.
Now it's called the National Health Association, and they also have seminars and conferences and online offerings. It's a fantastic group.
And you attend those conferences?
You can, and I would encourage everybody to go hear fantastic speakers, learn, create a tribe of people that you can collaborate with moving forward in your life, and develop new friendships around healthy food.
The carnivore diet's kind of like this new thing, you know? It's not like there's been this movement that's been going on for centuries. Now, they may argue differently about it, but what I find intriguing is there's so much overwhelming evidence to support a whole food plant-based diet, and it's not just in the science, but it's also institutions and organizations. You got things like National Health Association, but you also have Hippocrates, with a lot of success, and True North. PCRM, Nutrition Facts is really elaborate. With all the meat, egg, and dairy-oriented things out there, there's nothing that I'm aware of as organized and professional and elaborate and successful and long-standing as these types of institutions we have in this movement. Yet we're such a small segment of the population. Isn't that weird? What are your thoughts on those paleo, Atkins, keto, carnivore?
Yes, so these sort of approaches to health are based on a couple flawed thoughts. The number one is based upon our own personal opinions and perspectives, and this is a very simple phrase. People like to hear good things about their bad habits. That's the reality. So if I say to a patient, you can eat all the meat, dairy, and butter you want, they go, I love this guy, he's amazing, right? But if I say eat steamed broccoli and brown rice, they ask for my medical diploma, right? Where'd you get that? Did you go to med school? And so the reality is we like to hear good things about our bad habits. So that's number one. Number two is there's a massive industrial, right? Pharmacologic, food and industry, et cetera, all tied together, right? Keeping people unwell and sick. And so the reality is, for example, the number one earner in most small hospitals is heart disease. So if they start losing money on heart disease in hospitals, it's not good for the bottom line. So when Dean Ornish proved in his studies that you could save $30,000 per person who had heart disease in the first year alone, what are we doing here? We're saving money? That's not good. It's good for you and I because we're patients, right? But it's not good for the industry. And we presently live in a place where there's a healthcare industry. That's the problem. It's really just about this tie-in between money, finances, etc. But it's created a relative health slavery for the people in our nation, where people become addicted to food-like substances of abuse. They then become sick and unwell, and now they require physiologic toxins known as medications to play with their physiologic parameters to keep them alive and, quote, healthy. But the reality is, the heart of all that is going back to the diet that we're intended for. It's pretty clear. We have grinding molar teeth, we have weak stomach acid, we have long intestines that are extremely diverse. We lack uricase, we lack meaningful claws, we have color vision, and we lack meaningful canines. There's no carnivore on earth that has all of those things together. So from a pure anatomic and physiologic perspective, we are clearly intended to consume largely plant-based matter. I mean, simply try to explain away the fact that your cat and dog can only go up and down with its mouth. Yet we can do this. But the ability to go side to side is only found in herbivorous creatures. It's very straightforward. Anybody who tries to argue otherwise has purely fallen into the fallacy of hearing good things about their bad habits.
A lot of people, though, go on these diets now, and they experience some, at least transient success. Is that something that you think is going to be sustainable, or what are your thoughts on people having success? And I hear about it all the time in the comments. Well, I went on a keto diet and I lost weight and I feel great. I mean, how can we argue with that?
Transitioning away from the standard American diet to consuming lean meats and a few vegetables is actually a really good choice. But it's not nearly as good as a choice as transitioning all the way to a whole food plant-based program. Of course, it's never as good for animals, which of course have to suffer, murder, and die every day for that individual. But from a purely health perspective, the scientific data is quite clear. Long-term follow-up studies in people who choose a largely ketogenic or Paleolithic diet show increased rates of heart disease, the #1 cause of death in men and women, as well as various forms of cancer. So short-term studies show that people's health parameters, weight loss, blood pressure, blood sugars, actually do improve short-term on Paleolithic or ketogenic diets with some elements of vegetables in them. However, long-term data shows an increased rate of death, which is what we don't want. So again, we don't want to short-circuit our real goal. Your real goal when you make a decision about food should be about long-term health and short-term health. So don't buy into the lies and the falsehoods and the misappropriated data. Short-term evidence says, yes, there is some improvement. Long-term evidence going on Paleolithic or ketogenic diet shows increased risk of all-cause mortality. Every long-term study shows that.
Anything else you want to say to parents? Because I think it's really kind of the last frontier, raising kids vegan and proving that this is something more ideal than anything else.
What's the greatest gift you can give your children? It's health. And that truly is what the poet said too, right? Our health is our greatest wealth, and that's so true. If you give your children a foundation, that foundation of health, of vitality, now they're going to have the rest of their life open to them instead of unnecessary diseases, instead of unnecessary medication needs, etc., the rest of their life. So your energy is better, your vitality better, your sexual life is better, your mental clarity is better, your disease risks go down, the list goes on and on. Not to mention the empathetic aspect of it, the almost spiritual aspect of not killing or maiming or causing other animals to have to suffer every morning. What a beautiful thing to wake up for your children every morning to say, nobody had to die for me today. How true that is and what a beautiful statement it is. But for you as a parent, if you want to give the very best to your child, you want to give them the very best. That's what you want for them. Well, I'm here to tell you as a Harvard and Mayo trained physician that the very best for them is a micronutrient dense, a diverse plant-based whole food program. That is what the data says clearly and incontrovertibly. That is why the NIH, the CDC, the AHA, every major institution says eat more fruits and vegetables, right? Eat more unrefined complex carbohydrates. Every single one of them says that exact same thing again and again. Yet in America today, fewer than 9% of individuals achieve the recommended amount of vegetables. Fewer than 12% achieve the recommended amount of fruit. And fewer than 23% of Americans achieve the recommended amount of exercise. In fact, 70% of calories consumed by adolescents last year were derived from hyper-processed foods. That means all of the fast food junk out of freezers, bags, cups, and cans. That's what they were consuming. That was a study recently published in one of the most prestigious medical journals in America, saying that 70% of calories. So my friends, if you've got kids out there, you may not say, well, I'm not ready to go 100%, but then start doing better for them, for their health, for the animals, for the planet. Make healthier decisions. Add more fruits and vegetables to every plate, every platter, every smoothie, every snack. And little by little transition to what is the most scientifically proven approach to human health. That is what the data says. That is where the evidence is. And if you as a parent want the best for your child, you can do this. You are capable. Don't throw up the smoke screens and say you don't know how or where to prepare or whatever. The books are out there. The videos are on YouTube. The people are there to support you. Start doing it. And before you know it, you'll have friends and family members who jump in with you. Before you know it, your circle of influence will grow to now you and your family begin to place a stick in the ground, if you will, with reverberating effects for generations to come. Just like my great-grandfather did, who one day said, I don't feel well, I'm not as healthy as I could be. He did his research and he realized plant-based nutrition would be at the heart of long-term success. And he put that staff down in the ground. As a result, it's reverberated out to every generation in my family since, both near and far. And as a result, so many lives transformed through the powerful choices that parent made for his children. Do the same for yours, and the gift is the greatest one you can ever give.
Is it affordable for everybody? Is it true that, beans and things can be the least expensive foods?
That's right, it is true. And that is merely an excuse that many of us throw up as a reason not to be successful. A great example, I had a patient not too long ago. He was a 35-year-old African-American male with a body mass index about 45. He had diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure, and was on medications for all of them. He and I saw each other for knee pain, and his knees were beginning to develop some moderate arthritis. And I said, you're too young for this. And I know you did not want to be having these health conditions. When you were 12, this wasn't your dream. You didn't want to be 35 on medications every day, feeling lousy, fatigued, tired, and inflamed. He heard me. He was in the right headspace, and he said, I'm going to do the best I can. He went home with my nutritional handout, and there were things he couldn't get. They weren't available to him financially. He came about 6 weeks later, he came back to see me. He had lost over 40 pounds. And I said, what'd you do? And he goes, well, there was a gas station down the street, and I'd go there every morning, I'd get a fruit cup. And he goes, and there's a Panda Express down the road, I'd get white rice and steamed vegetables once or twice a day. That's all I could afford, that's what I did. Guess what? His diabetes was gone. His blood pressure was gone. His weight had dropped, his pain was gone. He had the biggest smile on his face. He realized that although this wasn't perfect, he was doing the best that he could. That's what we each need to do, the best that we can. If you've got the big paycheck and you want to go roll it into all organic, micronutrient-rich foods and all kinds of things from the Amazon and cool places and whatever, knock yourself out. But if you got a limited paycheck, well, then it's time to go to some of the little mom and pop stores, maybe some of the local ethnic stores, and get the rice at cents on the dollar. Get the beans at cents on the dollar and put them in a pot yourself at home. There's so many simple things that you can do to improve your health without spending all of your money there, right? But remember that yes, to some extent, you got to spend your money somewhere. You're either going to spend it on healthy food now or you're going to spend it on medications and insurance and surgeries and disability later on. In addition, I do say to many people, I don't want to hear a thing about money if you're still buying alcohol. If you're buying alcohol, don't even talk to me that food is expensive. Don't talk to me. Until you put down that absolutely unnecessary substance, right? And now you're buying just your groceries to consume, we shouldn't even have a conversation about cost of food. That's crucial, and that's absolutely essential. We need to be honest when it comes to our health, right? And when it comes to the choices we make. Many of us throw up false facades and say, oh, this and that, and it's too hard here, and money or finances or time, right? I don't want to do. But we're really just putting up excuses to not achieve our best health. It's absolutely essential. For some of us, this is a real problem. And you know what the next step is? Identifying the problem, coming up with a plan, and now addressing it. That's the key. So if time is challenging for you, well, how do we meal prep? How do we simplify? If you've got finances and time is an issue, hey, can you pre-purchase things, right? So that food is pre-prepared for you and ready to go. Can you hire somebody to prepare the food for you, even if you've got the finances that are there for that? But every little thing that can essentially be a block for us is just an opportunity for you and I to work through it. I like people to remember this. You're no longer a leaf, right? Blown this way and that way with emotions and challenges and difficulties and stressors. When it comes to your health, you've got to become the architect. You've got to be the architect of your health. You know, the architect's building a home or a building or a plaza. They don't just go, oh, it's too hard, it's over, and they just throw their hands up. No, they go, this is tough. Man, I got to figure this out. Where do we get the lumber from, and how do I get this? And there are not enough nails, and my goodness, the embankment here, and well, they figured it all out though. And they call in the people to help and assist with that. They get the plumbers, they get the engineers, they get the electrician, and together they build the most amazing building ever that they can. That's you and your health. You've got to recognize where the challenges are, where the difficulties are, where your weaknesses are, where your strengths are, and create a team, right? Create a team that can help support you in achieving your best health. It is doable, you can do it, and your health is absolutely worth it.
You have a favorite quote you want to share?
Yes, I have a lot of favorite quotes, but they're all very long and I don't remember the whole ones. But I think my quote to you, or my stripping away of that quote is, that the real greatest gift that you get from eating a healthy program is your health. That is the great gift. And it is the best gift. It is an amazing gift. And it's all worth it. And that's what I want to encourage you in. That what you do is radically powerful, that the choices you make are incredibly powerful, and that your health is worth it, the health and the life of animals is worth it, and our planetary health is absolutely worth it.
Do you have a success story you want to share?
Sure. So just last week I was in clinic. I had an 81-year-old gentleman come back to see me in clinic. This was a gentleman about 5 weeks previously I had seen. He came in and his legs were swollen, extraordinarily edematous, full of fluid, right? His blood pressure was out of control. His diabetes was out of control. He had diabetic neuropathies in both legs. He had chronic knee pain. He used to work at a golf course where he'd be very active walking, but he no longer could because of his pain and because of his disability. And so I had a conversation with him. I said, you know, would you be willing to give me 4 weeks of your life and see what could happen? He went home and he did my 4-week nutritional program. And when he came back, he had lost 32 pounds in 4 weeks. His legs were no longer swollen. He was like, look at my legs. He's pulling his pants up and he's like, I've seen legs like this in years. And his wife looked over and said, I haven't seen legs like that in 20 years. Because all of the swelling from all the excessive salt and the renal or the kidney insufficiency and the backing up to his heart, it was all gone. His blood pressure, which had been in the 170s, 180s, was now 120s of his systolic. His blood sugars, which are 150s every morning, were now 90s. His diabetic neuropathies in his legs was gone. His knee pain was gone. And he was now, he said, I'm going to go back to my golf course and see if I get my job back because I really miss it so much. And I no longer have the pain that was keeping me from doing it. And he had the biggest smile on his face. This was a guy who's 81 years old, who could have easily said, doc, I'm too old, it won't work for me, right? All the excuses he had, right? He could have easily thrown them all up. But instead he said, you know what? I've still got a breath and a heartbeat. Why not? And he did it. And that's my challenge to you. Why not?